I received a package yesterday. Not a particularly strange package by any means, as I receive a considerable amount of mail deliveries in my line of work. My name is David, and I'm a moderately paid publisher. I just want to get this story out there, but I should probably start at the beginning. It was a warm day in the office. Although the space is cooled via central air, the system must have been struggling to keep up with the exceedingly increasing temperatures outside because the office was beginning to feel humid, the air stagnant, persuading my flesh to leak sweat from each one of my pores. I really didn't even feel like being there. I had gotten some saddening news the day prior regarding one of my more prestigious clients, a short story writer by the name of Joseph McCall. Joe had apparently committed suicide by throwing himself off a bridge, breaking himself an impact on the cold river stones below. I knew he'd been having some problems which had started to become evident in his work. I mean, his wife's suicide, his child gone missing, but I still never thought he would actually take his own life. Another thing I did not expect was the package that was delivered the day after I heard yesterday. It was apparently found on the bridge that Joe had leapt from by the police. After thorough documentation replication for evidential purposes, the pages were passed on to me. It was his last work, and a note with instructions to deliver it me was left on a post-it stuck to the face of the first page. I wish he had never sent that infernal booklet to me. I wish I had never read it, but hindsight, it's 2020, right? Unfortunately, I pulled the pages from the manila envelope and began to read the cover page. I immediately noticed something was off when I read the title. No One Will Listen to Me. The lines below read, by Joseph McCall, dedicated to Lynn and Morgan. These were obviously meant to be a testimony to his dead wife and lost child, as these were names of each family member, Lynn, his wife, and Morgan, his daughter. As cryptic as it was, I proceeded to the following page. The air was silent, crisp and clean. A faint smell of snow lingered about his nose. Only the sounds of nearby traffic could be heard. "Daddy, can you put the heat on?" Joseph's daughter asked him from behind her seat. They had been sitting there for a few minutes, and the heat began to slip from the interior of his SUV. His wife was still inside the office building, whose parking lot they now waited in. Joe grasped the ignition key and turned the engine over so as to allow heat to blow from his vents. His wife was a manic depressive, and although her medicine did a wonderful job at keeping her condition at bay, she was required to attend a therapist visit each month in order to receive the prescriptions she needed. This left Joseph and his 5-year-old daughter sitting in the parking lot for nearly 45 minutes. Sure, the interior of the office was heated, but Joe didn't mind running the engine a bit to keep them warm. He was typically reclusive, and the benefits of being able to sit in peace and quiet, away from the judgments of the wondering eyes by waiting in the black blazer, outweighed the benefits of waiting inside. A few more moments went by. Morgan was chattering around in the back seat before Lynn, his wife, could be viewed in the side mirror approaching the large vehicle. "How'd it go?" Joe asked as she opened the passenger side door and climbed into her seat. "Good," she spoke. He asked how I was doing, how we were doing, and about the kids. He told me I was doing really well and to call if I ever needed anything. "Just the usual spiel," she ended. "Good," Joseph stated as he placed the already running gas guzzler into reverse, made his 2-point turn, and then proceeded to drive from the parking lot to Superior Health, Mental Health Incorporated. The couple chatted about her visit and Morgan's subsequent behavior from having to wait in the parking lot, which was surprisingly good. Although the child would tantrum and misbehave from time to time, Morgan was an overall pleasure to have as a daughter, full of smiles, joy, and a light that seemed to emanate from her angelic little face. Amongst the chatter from the backseat of the conversation being held by the couple, the sounds of tires humming along the pavement and whoosh of traffic could be heard. Although the humming of the wheels persisted, the sounds of passing vehicles slowly tapered off until the tires and the chatter were all to be heard. The trek back to their family home would take them out of the bustle of the city and into a desolate and peaceful countryside, which was currently enveloped by the pitch of night. When Joe's wife took a look at him, he eyed something near the road about 50 feet away and rapidly approaching due to the SUV's velocity. As it passed, he realized it could not be there. It couldn't be at all. It was a man, or man-like. He wore a top hat, a dull gray scarf, and a pristine black business suit. At first, the thing had only been standing there, seemingly staring motionless into the night, but as they passed by, Joe knew it was looking at the vehicle as its head turned to follow its trajectory. It was tall, inhumanly tall, with arms that seemed freakishly long and expanding. And its face, it had none. Only a blank canvas of flesh where there should be one. It was those monstrous features that made Joe question the reality of the thing. It wasn't until he glanced in the rear view, laying eyes upon it once again, that he realized that his eyes were not deceiving him. The figure just stood there, distorted, stretched, and long. "Did you just see that?" Joe asked his wife. "See what?" Lynn replied, having no idea what had just occurred. While the thing stood and zoomed by on the passenger side, Lynn was focused on her husband, paying no attention to the happenings outside of the Chevy. "That thing we just passed," Joe exclaimed before he realized she probably didn't even notice it, as it seemed to resemble a tall, branchy tree that lined the sides of the Whittery Road. "What thing?" she asked. "Nothing," Joe stated, as the thing had long disappeared from sight. "Maybe my eyes were just playing tricks on me," he thought to himself. Deciding to just chalk it up as a weary mind and forget the thing, Joe changed his focus back to the road. Before long, the left turn from the driveway was upon them, and the SUV slowly rolled into place before its occupants left its confines and entered their small country-style home. It wasn't until a few weeks later that he would encounter the being again. Joe was on his way back from the store, the Chevy's passenger seat full of red roses, chocolates, and a large stuffed white bear holding a large red plush heart. A smaller box of chocolates and a single carnation resided in the same seat nearest the door. The array of pleasantries was something Lynn had come to hope for from her husband on Valentine's Day. Not that she expected it. In fact, she was genuinely surprised and made extremely happy each time her husband came through for her on this day. Joe pulled into his driveway after a long day at work. Before heading up the stairs to his home and entering through the front door, he quickly gathered up the gifts from the passenger seat and slammed shut the door. The air had a lingering smell of snow that graced the ground, although most of it had turned to a yellowish brown, especially the roadsides where the plows had frequently passed. The day was late, nearly 5:30 p.m., and the diminished sunlight prompted the exterior illumination to switch on. "Lynn, I'm home," Joe proclaimed. Lynn jogged to meet her husband and threw her arms around him, nearly forcing Joe to lose his grasp on the gifts, which would have sent him to the floor. "Happy Valentine's Day." Joe handed the bouquet of roses, large teddy bear, and considerably sized box of chocolates in a red heart-shaped box. Before she could kiss him with a thank you, "Daddy, did you bring me anything for Valentine's Day?" Morgan asked with her typical age-related impudence. "As a matter of fact, monkey, I did," Joe replied with a smile as he reached out his other hand containing a small box of chocolates and the single carnation. "Oh, thanks, Daddy," she exclaimed with the brightest of smiles. "You're the bestest daddy in the whole world." Joe smiled at her and reminded her that he was her only daddy. "Well, then you're the best only daddy in the world," she retorted. He knew what she meant. He knew what she meant, and revealed in the fact that his beloved daughter held him up so high. He gave his daughter a hug and allowed his wife to lead him into the dining room. A lavish pepperoni chicken side dinner with fresh garden salad and Chardonnay graced the large dark oak table. Before long, the little family was seated together and enjoying a pleasant holiday meal, just the three of them. The night slowed to an end with Lynn preparing the master bedroom for nighttime, while Joseph helped Morgan climb into the bed with a tuck in the smaller bedroom down the hall. "Good night, sweetie," Joe presented Morgan with a kiss on the cheek. After she replied to her father's nightly message, Joe stood up and walked out the door, leaving only the dim glow of the nightlight to illuminate the room. Joe trotted down the silent hall towards the light of the master bedroom. Before he could push open the door, his daughter shouted out in terror from down the hall. Hairs on the back of Joe's neck stood on end as he shot back around and sprinted towards the child's room, Joe arriving before his wife, as it took more than a moment to put on her gown. Additionally, she knew that her husband was with her, so the pressures of an emergency were not present for her. It would have been better if it was. It would have helped if she had seen it too, he thought. In reality, however, it would have unlikely made any difference whatsoever. There, in the shadows, just beyond his daughter's bed, was a large, shadowy mass. Tentacles seemed to writhe and squirm as arms seemed to outstretch without limits. Although no silhouette of a top hat could be discerned, he knew exactly what it was. The nightlight lent a tiny glow, only illuminating the thing's face, or lack thereof. Breaking free from the paralyzing fear, Joe instinctively hit the light switch. He must have been going mad. It wasn't his mind playing tricks. He saw it vividly. It was right there. Only now, as soon as the light flickered on and brightened the entire room, the thing had simply vanished. Joe knew he wasn't the only one who'd seen it. Little Morgan sat petrified on her bed, an unbroken gaze resting upon where the thing had just been a split second before. Before he could walk over there, however, his wife came through the door, Jan pushing him aside and proceeding to her daughter's side. "Why are you just standing there? Can't you see she's terrified?" It what?" Lynn asked. "There was a big, scary monster in my room and Daddy scared him away, Mommy." "Well, that's good," she stated to her daughter while presenting her husband with a puzzled look. For the moment, Joe had no response. He struggled with the concepts and images his eyes had just presented his mind with. Lynn retucked her daughter in while Joe was wandering to the bedroom, trying to understand the recent event. "What the hell happened in there?" Lynn inquired behind him as he entered the room. I thought I saw something," Joe muttered. "We can't really convince our daughter there is no monster in her room if we act like there is one." "I didn't say I saw a monster, I just said I saw something," Joe proclaimed. "Now who needs to be on medication?" Lynn replied with a smirk. Joe reassured his wife that it was just his mind playing tricks on him and that he saw nothing. Although the couple laughed heartily about the situation, Joe knew that the thing he saw was not a trick of the mind. It was there at his daughter's bed, and he only hoped that it had disappeared from their lives for good. Unfortunately, his praise would go unanswered. Winter had finished up the last of its frigid grip, allotting room for the new budding of spring to come into blossom. The brisk days and icy nights came to an end as well. Known the throes of spring, the days were considerably warmer, even though the nights yet remained quite cold. The warmth of the days, that seemed to signal the approach of Morgan's birthday, allowed for family to celebrate the birth of their daughter at a nearby secluded park. Kids laughed and screamed amongst the midday sun while playing amongst each other all about the sprawling child's playground. Joe stood in a nearby field and overlooked the goings-on while Lynn sat next to Carol on a park bench, enjoying the incoming warmth of the spring while sipping sweet coffees and conversing about pleasant things. Joe winced at the sunshine while lifting a small red digital camera to his eye. He'd been snapping pictures all morning, enjoying the rays of sunshine and the smell of spring that was sure to give way to increasing amounts of lush greenery and the smells of fresh-cut grass. Smells made more appreciated due to their long absence in the depths of the northeast winter. It wasn't the kind of camera that immediately displayed each picture after it had been taken, so it wasn't until Joe had walked back over to Lynn and Carol that he reviewed the photos. At first, they were normal. Children were playing and Morgan along with them, that bright smile across her face. About 8 or 9 pictures in, he noticed it. That man, no, that thing in the background just lingering about the distant forest's edge. It couldn't be. At the distance depicted in the picture, it looked as if it could just have been one of the trees, only grown in a way that looks like a branchy being, especially without the signifying top hat that he had seen it wearing on his first encounter. But as the images progressed, the thing moved closer and closer towards the playground full of carefree, playing children. Joe furiously clicked through the pictures, watching the horror unfold, completely oblivious to the questions being asked by his wife, who noticed the increasingly intensifying look upon her husband's face. He had not seen it with his eyes. He surely would have noticed it if it had been there, but still, that thing entered the playground and approached the children within. Joe's face went pale as he viewed the last picture taken just before he had walked away. The thing had Morgan by the hands as if the two were getting acquainted. Joe's face shot up in terror, panic-stricken, scanning the swings, slides, the other playground apparatus for his beloved child. No sign of her anywhere. There, off in the distance near the trees with her back turned, walked Morgan, ever so closer to the foreboding woods. "No," Joe muttered. "Morgan!" "Honey, what's wrong? Where's... Oh my God, how did..." But before she could finish her phrase, Joseph had taken off, sprinting towards the forest and his daughter, who was disappearing into the tree line, his heart pounding, calling to his daughter as he ran. It didn't matter. Before he was even halfway there, she was gone. He searched the forest for hours, shouting her name until his voice was scratched and useless. His wife joined them along with nearby parents. The police showed up with dogs, search parties, all they could muster. Although the rescue party kept up the search for days, they too were unable to find any trace of Morgan. No one could explain how a 5-year-old could have gotten beyond the grasp of such a group effort in such a short period of time. When Joe attempted to explain what had happened, no one would believe him, not even Lynn. He remembered the camera, but as he showed the pictures to the group of watching individuals, all leaning in to view them, each picture was now only an indescribable blurs. The children, the swings, the creature, nothing could be effectively made out. "These were here before. These were different, I swear," Joe tried to explain, but this only seemed to solidify everyone's belief. The police chalked it up to a child abduction and Morgan would never be seen again. Joe didn't deal with Morgan's disappearance well, digging in all kinds of research to try and figure out what he knew he had seen. He'd never seen it again since that day. It must have come for her. It must have been after her from the very beginning, from the first time I had seen that thing on the side of the road. This line of questioning led Joe through all kinds of research, from the Grubman legends, the Tall Man legends, all the way back to the Babylonian demon god Alu. This thing has been documented since the beginning of history as we know, yet everyone seems to ignore its existence. People make stories and romanticize the idea, calling it Slender Man and rounding off the jaggedness of the idea by diminishing the monster that it actually is. It took his daughter. The more he tried to convince Lynn of this, the more she resented her husband not getting to her in time, for not helping her cope with what she believed to be the reality of this tragedy. Lynn fell deep into a depression, one that her meds could not bring her back from. Joseph awoke at his desk, face stuck to the oak wood. He peeled himself up from the surface, rubbed his eyes, and stretched out. His back that had been frozen in a slumped position for over 5 hours. As Joe made his way into the kitchen and went to pour himself a cup of coffee, he noticed that none had been made. This struck him as odd, as Lynn was usually up way before the sun and had coffee already sitting within the pot. Her depression actually seemed to emphasize her insomnia, as she slept very little recently. Still, no coffee was in the pot. Joe proceeded to prepare the coffee himself and went to locate his beloved wife. He checked the bedroom. She was not there, nor was the bed ruffled, as if no one had slept in it at all. Morgan's room, he thought as he quickly sauntered down the corridor. Opening the door, he saw this room was vacant too. A profound sadness filled his heart. He missed her so much. Weeping, Joe made his way into the bathroom to use the toilet and dry his eyes. As he did, Joe glanced into the tub and vomited on the floor. Lynn lay in the tub, eyes pale and wide. Sadness filled her frozen face. The blood pooled upon the floor had most recently come from the large gaping wounds in her wrist, specifically the one on her right arm that dangled from the side of the tub. Lynn had killed herself. Behind her, written in blood which had begun leaking down the wall, was written in the words, "It's your fault." Joe lost his sanity. The air on the bridge was a little cool and breezy. It was a nice day, Joe thought to himself. He took in the sun, he took in the sky, the sun, the birds, all of the pleasant things that surrounded him, for he knew that it would be the last time he would enjoy them. When he went to take in the trees, his eyes lingered. If he could just catch a glimpse of that thing again, he would have a reason to stay. Joe did not, and he knew in his heart he would never see it again. He placed a large manila envelope on the bridge, propped against the guardrail, and climbed to the top of the railing, standing upon the edge. That was the end of my client's last tale. Of course, I immediately found the use of his family's names in the story a little unorthodox. I imagined at first that the story was an abstract representation of the traumatizing offense that he had suffered, and nothing more than that. At first. That was yesterday. Today I saw something on the side of the road as I made my early morning commute to work. There, on the side of the road, under the dark gray sky, stood a tree-like figure with no face, wearing a black business suit and top hat. I would have assumed it to be a tree, and that my eyes were playing tricks on me until I saw it grasp the hand of what may have been a child before turning around and gliding back into the woods.